Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located here on planet Earth. We're excited to be here with Peter from Research in Action. Welcome to our partner webinar regarding the recent report that he's filed. For those that aren't as familiar with Peter and his work, he's a little bit, in my mind, sort of the godfather of sort of PRM and the PMA space in terms of from a research perspective, and he's been involved with that space and advising and researching for quite some time. And many of the folks that we look to today in that space, in that area have come and stood on his shoulders, and so we're excited for the new breed of research that he's bringing to bear. I'll turn the time over to him to introduce himself a little bit further.
Hey Gary, thanks for the invitation to speak on this webinar. Looking forward to it. And you're right, I've been watching this market and helping marketing and channel professionals for nearly 20 years now, working at Meta Group, Gartner, and at Forrester Research, and now, wow, for 3 years already as an independent analyst with several roles, including this one you see documented on the slide as research director for the company called Research in Action. My discussions and research are really always focused on the processes involved for a manufacturer or vendor that distributes products or services through partner organizations as their indirect channel. The two categories most important to marketing professionals, they're the people that I look after, are channel marketing and channel enablement. Channel marketing, well, that's brand and asset management, where programs, promotions, leads are managed both down and up the channel. Channel marketing is usually known under the term TCMA, through channel marketing automation, based on a report that Laurie Wistow at Forrester and I did maybe about 7-8 years ago. But vendors, of course, must also manage the processes around the partner relationship itself: recruitment, registration, classification, contractual details, information exchange, and much more. And this process family is more known as Partner Relationship Management, PRM. PRM because it has many similarities with CRM. Now, recently, my ex-colleagues at Forrester documented the current vendor landscape for all the software being offered to automate all of those processes. And they named 183 vendors and were able to spread that very long list into 7 different categories. You know, in a similar diagram to the one that Scott Brinker produces each year for his landscape of marketing software vendors, and he's now at over 8,000. Now, the main reaction that business people have when they see those sorts of graphics is not necessarily to congratulate the analyst for the great research, which it definitely was, Jay McBain, my friend, but it's more like, wow, that's complex, complicated, it's too much. Are you expecting me to buy 7 different products for my child processes, with 7 contracts to manage and pay, 7 teams of people to get to know, and probably at least 7 different user interfaces, and so on? Now, in our survey on exactly that question, way back in 2019, we noted a clear marker given by 1,500 business buyers. They prefer a channel management software platform that covers all their needs: partner marketing, partner management, even partner sales. And to be honest, most vendors are not reacting to this market need. They still focus on either channel marketing or enablement only, or even something much more specific. To be honest, just one task sometimes from a business person's perspective. But in the future, manufacturers will not only want just one integrated channel platform, they'll also seek a solution that can support a highly volatile partner community through a much more complex business cycle, from connection to order processing through the service delivery. So I expect channel enablement and marketing software in the future to morph to a more general platform for what's, let's call it, partnership automation, in a quite different partner management world. So next slide, please. Well, how different and why? Well, I like to describe how I see this transformation under these 5 major changes. I had already forecast these changes when presenting a webinar with Impartner, and that was about 18 months ago. But now the COVID pandemic crisis has accelerated the inevitable. it's accelerated the digitization of the customer lifecycle, including the selling process. You or your channel partners couldn't go visit customers anymore, and you couldn't sit in a room with sales reps and run partner enablement sessions. But let's be honest, for decades, channel enablement and marketing were just a peripheral process in most industries. The mantra was, first we sell direct, and then we'll find some partners to cover other markets, which was fine for most firms then because they were selling physical product, or at least on-premise software, and needed knowledgeable sellers to present and position the offer to buyers. The people responsible for the channel side of the business were usually working in their own silo, often outside of the view of marketing or even sales management, usually not considered to be a strategic part of the company even. But that stopped, because now almost every industry is morphing to an as-a-service business model, and buyers are pulling the service based on their own research. And hey, channel partners are not being disintermediated. That was a strange cliche back in the 1990s when the internet took hold, and everybody was writing about e-business and e-commerce taking work away from channel partners. No way. If anything, the channel has become even more influential and advocational for businesses. But the business model in the channel itself has changed. And channel partners are now more likely to live off revenues earned from the end user than from the manufacturer they now only occasionally represent. And in addition to resellers and distributors, we now have new channel players called affiliates, referrers, associations, communities, groups, ambassadors. This transformation has already hit the tech industry hard. I still remember back in 2019 again, when I was still traveling, sitting at the top floor of the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco and reviewing the briefings I'd heard that day. Salesforce had told me they plan to work with perhaps 250,000 new partners in the near future. It was the only way they could double their revenue in the next 5 years, they said. Now, they know that software as a service is not necessarily a reselling market. Only around 30% of SaaS revenues are booked by partners. That's compared to the old software models of around 70%. But they still realize that their future success will depend on the recommendations and influence of many new intermediaries, and most of whom the vendor will not even know or recruit formally as reseller partners. That there'll be lawyers, tax advisors, estate agents, realtors as you call them in the US, financial advisors, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, as the nursery rhyme says. What's happened is that, just as we like to talk about customer-centric or buyer-led purchasing, the partners are now taking control over the business that they'll do with vendors, from push to pull. Vendors can no longer map out their target markets and plan partnerships around the battlefield like a general ordering his armies around a war zone. The market, the partner communities run the new game. So we'll see these other trends also happening over the next years in industry after industry. Software company in Switzerland down the road from where I live called Veeam, they provide cloud data management software and lead their industry segment. They now work through 70,000 partners around the world. They don't have hundreds of partner recruiters and managers to handle this volume. They must rely on a software platform to do that. And their channel enablement platform includes a concierge program in recognition of one of the trends on this slide. The program providing relevant information to a concierge partner and also rewarding that behavior. And I know that one of your clients, Impartner, called TeamViewer, headquartered here in Germany up the road, has similar challenges. And it's not only the tech industry. When I talk to a client in southern Germany, one of the global leading manufacturers of industrial bearings, Schaeffler Group, they've found out that their new sensor technology has created a whole set of new markets for them as an Internet of Things data provider. For example, the sensors they put into trains is now being combined with artificial intelligence technology to collect and provide important maintenance data about the railway tracks themselves on which the trains are running. And that's information they can sell to the Bundesbahn, who maintain the infrastructure. So Schaeffler continues to be a manufacturer and supplier of ball bearings, but they now also have a data service business through totally new business partnerships. As a service is happening everywhere. And ultimately, when all of these trends have completed their cycle from left to right, all manufacturers will need a much more holistic partner automation system which covers all of these scenarios. I say much more because till now most channel software has just been focused on just one or two of the family of processes under channel enablement and marketing. So that was my background thinking to some new research that I started this year across 1,500 businesses on a global basis. Next slide, please. So we surveyed 1,500 businesses and asked them several questions about their partner management automation challenges. And for example, look here at the wide variety now of the types of partners that businesses recognize that they're working with and dealing with. It's much more complex and also fleeting than it was 5 or 6 years ago. Much more greater volumes. I've mentioned some numbers already, 250,000 for one company and so on, but also much more agility is required because some of these partners flit in as a partner for maybe 2 months and then go away again for 6 months and come back in and do something and so on. So it's not something where you have people in the street going out, signing up contracts, managing those contracts, setting quotas and so on. It's become much more of an agile partner portfolio that companies are working with. On the next slide, you can see the top focus that those 1,500 businesses told us when they're investing in partner management automation projects. Managing that relationship optimally is the top item that they named. Now that cannot be done with the volumes of partners that are now involved in digital commerce and digital marketing, cannot be done by people and with manual programs or individual programs. It has to be done on a very complex and comprehensive digital platform. You can see, understand which partners are providing the best business results or analytics, going into information, understanding what influence and what attribution could be recorded for the various types of partners in the channel in your business process. All the different types of partners as number 3. You see it's become a much more complex challenge. And then as the last point, just to sort of bring that across, one of the other questions that we asked on the next slide was about what proportion of revenues do you think are being earned and influenced through your channel partners. And lo and behold, if we look at the blue bar down there, the 43%, we're saying nearly half of the companies that were in the survey, nearly half of the 1,500 companies told us that they recognize already that up to a quarter of their business has been influenced by channel partners. Not direct revenues, but influenced. A very soft touch maybe, but something that needs to be tracked and even rewarded. And in fact, if you add the 31% to the 45, you're getting almost to 3/4 of the companies really know that there's a very strong influence in the channel that they need to record and work on. Which means that one of the things they're looking for, as recorded on the next slide, when we ask them about the different phases of the partnership program that they want automated, they list out number 1, monitoring and reporting as being the most important. They were asked to rank importance from 1 to 5, 5 being the most important. So monitoring, partnering is named as the most important, and then tracking and attribution then named as the second most important thing as well. And these are digital customer journeys that are now being tracked and where attribution has to be calculated and attributed. These are digital partnerships. This is primarily e-commerce. Most of the software as a service companies in the tech industry nowadays are selling through e-commerce. They have BDRs. They're measured on annual retention rates and getting to 120% of retention each year in terms of a business model and a successful business model. It's a whole new world compared to manufacturers selling physical machines through resellers and distributors. So the world is changing, and in the report that I published now based on some of those questions I've just shown a moment ago, I showed and listed out my insights based on what I think is going on. So I think the advent of, I'm calling it X as a service or anything as a service in many sectors, really does introduce that new dimension of partnerships. And when they add software-based services or apps around their products, manufacturers are engaging with new partners in the cloud and in marketplaces. And cloud has already disrupted many an established vendor-partner relationship in the IT sector, as I've said. Partners now of computer hardware vendors, whatever they are now, offer their solutions on the cloud instead and need partnerships in a different form altogether. And the same is going to happen in all the other manufacturing areas. The fact that partners have taken control means that manufacturers can no longer, as I said, map out those target markets. The partners, communities run the game. And companies must now cope with tens of thousands of potential partners around the world. And individual recruiters and managers just can't handle that volume. They must rely on a software platform to do that work for them. Attribution is really becoming a business fundamental. Channel performance and attribution was always important, but now there are many more types of attribution. The reselling, distributing, we know about, but recommending, influencing, listing, and the accurate attribution to all those worthy partners is now an economic priority. And the modern systems will need to include the truly advanced multi-touch attribution functions beyond those basic attribution things like last touch and first touch, which means that the reward systems must also become multifaceted. In the old days, traditional systems would have deal registration, discount margin contracts, shared MDF fundings, simple processes supported by those traditional software products. But in the digital world, well, there are many more types of compensation and rewards, and most of them will require much more sensitive and a dynamic partner platform. So those are the trends that I recorded around the market itself, and I have a separate slide in the report which talks about trends relating to the vendors on the next slide. Maybe a dramatic statement, but this is a call that I'd like to make here, that the new PMA, Partner Management Automation vendor landscape, that I'm putting into this report is going to be leaving pure play PRM or TCMA vendors behind. The previous report in 2019 already highlighted that this was an issue with many vendors, and many vendors were happy to do business as usual, find clients who wanted the same. But COVID-19 has been the accelerant for digital transformation across all channels, and those vendors will now run out of addressable clients. They're also likely to lose much of their installed base as they, the customers, need to transform. An integration of all the PMA functions will become important and really increasingly significant to all buyers. Because most manufacturers have suffered a channel software stack with many parts, a PRM plus other software tools that the PRM doesn't cover, and with smaller volumes and maybe more or less manual channel management, that was really not so problematic. But in the digital business world that I've just described, with higher volumes of transactions, transaction types, with higher volumes of partners and partner types, companies will want a much more comprehensive and, more importantly, a fully integrated PMA platform. Now, some PMA vendors are starting to realize that they sell to the manufacturers, but the worthiness of their product, the value of their product, is actually about providing a partner experience. Now, in the manufacturer-led channel model, vendors messaged and configured all their products to the buyer needs. But the balance of power, remember, I said, has moved to the partners. Partners have many business relationships, on average around 30. So 30 different manufacturers they work with. So the partners have to deal with the idea that they have to navigate multiple portals provided by those vendors each day. And they are now starting to pressure the manufacturers and prefer to work with those manufacturers who are providing the best user experience to them to reduce their own friction in acclimatization and retraining. So PMA vendors really need to take note. It's all about partner experience now. The last point about cloud-based, I think, is clear across all the different markets I look at. I do this type of work through the year in about 10 different marketing processes, and cloud-based and SaaS now has come across as the de facto way of doing this work. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk now about a little different topic that is also covered in the report and is part of the research that I do. So as you've seen, that we've gone out to talk to 1,500 businesses. On a global basis, We asked them various questions about partner management automation. We provided them at the start with a definition. We qualify them as being involved in the business decision around investing in those projects. And then we asked them about, what tools would you use if you were looking for the right vendors to talk to and to consider. And then we get a little table like this, where you can see that research reports on the far left is the most preferred sort of source of information to be doing it. Of course, being selfish as we are, we had vendor selection matrix as the vendor comparison example, but other examples of vendor comparisons would be a Forrester Wave or a Gartner Magic Quadrant. So there are different types of research reports that people can work with. And on the next slide, you can see a sort of a little positioning or differentiation between those different types of reports. On the left are those Gartner, Forrester type reports that I just mentioned a moment ago. I spent 20 years working on those types of reports at Meta Group, Gartner Group, and Forrester. They were reports written by the analyst only. The analyst would basically work on a product category and then think about the vendors that they know about in that product category. They would analyze a lot of information provided by the vendor. The poor vendors would jump through many, many hoops, do demos, fill out multi-page questionnaires, give 3-hour presentations, whatever, just to make sure the analyst is fully informed. And then the analyst scores about 15 different criteria, maybe 20 criteria, and ends up with the wave picture or the magic quadrant picture, whatever. Now, by definition, when I was a Forrester analyst, I was picking those vendors in my wave that were interesting to the Forrester readers. Forrester readers, i.e. Forrester clients, and the same applies at Gartner, were large enterprises, usually large international enterprises, mostly headquartered with a North American bias. That was the customer base that we worked with at Forrester. So that basically informed the list of vendors that an analyst would put into that report. So those are the reports that you get from those companies. At the far right, you can see some different information that's now freely available on G2, Capterra, TrustRadius, they're examples. They're the sort of TripAdvisors of the business application software world. And you can go there and get information about the different vendors in a certain topic based on user input. G2 and Capterra really do a lot of good work now trying to bring that information together in summary form, but it's really a very busy website each time. You have lots of individuals writing their comments, and you have to sort of work through that sort of piles of comments and really get the impression that you want about the vendors and get information that you want. The work that I've done now with Research in Action that we created as a brand new methodology when we started a few years ago is a mix of the two things. So we do this survey and go to 1,500 businesses. We talk about the topic, and then we ask them, could you tell us and give us feedback about one, maybe even two vendors that you know well enough in this area so that we can score that vendor in our report. And then I talk to the vendors that are scored highest in the report, and I get a briefing for them, and I do about maybe 25 to 30% of the scoring. So 70-odd% of the scoring is market-based, user-based, and 30% is O'Neill the analyst. And that's the research, the user experience influence analyst ratings that we put together. On the next slide, you can see the sort of demographics that we use when we do our surveys. It's a global survey spread across the world, across lots of different industries. Our experience when we talk to companies about decision-making around various aspects of software is that there is now a wide range of persona, job titles involved in making those decisions. It's not just a project manager decision, it's definitely not an IT decision, and it's definitely not a sales operation or CMO decision. It's a range, it's a buying center that's now quite complex. So you can see all the different range of job titles. For the report that I'm talking about today, of course, we expanded that to include channel managers, channel executives, of course, that are involved in the whole process. So we collect information not only about trends and preferences and challenges, but about what do people think about the leading vendors around this topic. And lo and behold, on the next slide, we have a nice summary of that information that we collected. These were the top vendors that were named in the survey. So these are the sort of top, how many are there? 13, I think, 12 or 13 vendors scored out of, as Forrester named it, 83 different vendors that do provide some sort of solution. It's a landscape. It's not necessarily a comparative product-to-product comparison like a Wave or a Quadrant is, because there are companies that might have 2, maybe even 3 of these vendors installed in their location to do various aspects of partner management automation. So these were the vendors that were basically top of the list. You can see on the right side of the slide a whole list of vendors that were scores lower than 3 out of 5 for the various attributes, or had less than 15 ratings only. We don't think having less than 15 is good enough for us to provide statistical analysis and provide the data back to the marketplace in the report. But quite a heavy list of vendors that you see here that were mentioned and scored against various evaluation criteria. On the next slide, you can see the evaluation criteria that we use as a background to our scoring schema. We asked questions around these items. So the market survey gives us a score about the perception of that company's vision, that go-to-market strategy. But actually, I'm the person as an analyst who scores that one with the heaviest of the weighting. Similarly, for innovation, differentiation, viability is purely my point of view. Recommendation index is actually, we asked a single question: would you recommend this vendor to your peers if they had a similar project? Yes or no? So a very concrete question that we ask in that case. And then you can see on the right side some various questions around the execution axis. So we ended up with a scoring schema out of 5 for each of these different criteria that enables us to put together total scores for each of the vendors. And on the next slide, you can see the vendor selection matrix, as we call it, that we then publish. Impartner has invited me to be presenting this data here in this webinar. Impartner have also purchased a reprint license for the report, so they can provide you with a full version of this slide with all the different company names on the slide on the left and all the different company names in the table on the right side. But you can see here that they were clearly the number 1 in terms of scores across strategy and execution across that range of companies that appeared in the vendor landscape. So congratulations to Impartner on achieving that score based on the market input, and then my ratings in addition as well to that, to do that. And for each of the vendors in the report, there is a profile that we put on the next slide, on the next page in the report, which basically describes some of the highlights of that vendor. This is all written by myself about their strategy, their execution, and the summary of the bottom line about what I think of each of those vendors. As you can see, that they not only were not only the overall global leader, but they actually received a recommendation index. That was the question I mentioned a moment ago. Would you recommend this vendor to your peers for a similar project? Of 99%, which gave those top marks, and the congratulations to them on that. Extra badges you can see in the bottom right because they were top of everybody in terms of the question price to value ratio and the question customer satisfaction, and they got a 5 out of 5, and that's purely from the market survey in terms of the breadth and depth of the solution offering that they provide. So outstanding results from the survey itself for Impartner as a vendor in this topic. Last but not least, I've got a slide right at the end that sort of points out that this is information that one of the things that we're doing at Research in Action is actually, let's say, democratizing some of this research. My poor old colleagues at Forrester, and I was there myself, you'd spend all this time working on a detailed analysis and provide a Forrester Wave, and then you put up on the website, and it's behind a paywall. And so realistically, the Forrester Wave for any topic is being read by between 100 and 150 different people, Forrester clients. So around 150 readers, you felt you did a great job because you had that many readers. We actually put out a public version So that previous slide would show an alphabetical list of the vendors and all the dots on the matrix, but without names. But all the other slides with the trends, the questions, the insights, my insights, and so all of that information is put on our public website, and we get around 14,000 views of each report when we publish that report. So we think we're providing a lot of great, useful information out there to the marketplace to help people to make decisions and to put together their shortlists. And I know that's true because, of course, after the report is published, I get a lot of contacts through LinkedIn or direct through email of people wanting to talk to me about more details and a deeper dive into some of the information that I have in those reports. So there we are, a quick summary of the Research in Action methodology and the report itself. As I said, there's a report reprint in more detail on the Impartner website, and I think I've used up my time quite perfectly, and back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Peter. Don't worry about the time. I think people are here to hear from Peter O'Neill more than myself for sure on the topic. I will quickly flash his contact information here up front if any of you are interested to reach out and talk to him a little bit further about the research, some of the insights and recommendations he has based on that. One of the things that, from our perspective at Impartner, my role being that of running our product development, product management, is to try to, alongside Peter, predict the future and see and identify the trends and things that are happening in the space, and hopefully we can do a decent job of doing that before they happen. I feel like Peter, one of the things that is unique about his body of research and why we like working with him so much is really the holistic nature of how he views the entirety of the landscape in the ecosystem. A lot of times, we focus easily on specific aspects of an overall partner experience or ecosystem management or technology stack. For various different reports. For example, Peter started and mentioned the TCMA versus the traditional PRM space. He talked about many other aspects, top to bottom, of managing a partner channel and the things that need to be provided to them in terms of, how we reward those partners, how we do that organically, how we do that in a way that makes sense for different types of partners that don't fit the traditional molds of, resellers and very managed, intentional, upfront relationships and the evolution, and being able to put all of that holistically into a single view of the universe really matches the way that we in Impartner view that universe as well. We look at everything in terms of a journey, which is something very similar to, as Peter described it, in some of the responses map to various aspects and things of the relative import that a lot of these vendors see depending on space and vertical. So if you look end-to-end at the entire, maybe what we call possible life cycle of a partner, from coming in and being recruited, perhaps in a traditional sense, when to being able to be enrolled, activated, and strategically enabled in terms of establishing what the strategic opportunity is for the joint partnership, and then providing all the tools throughout the entirety of the sales life cycle, especially in a traditional reseller type sense, through generating demand, managing that demand, quoting against it, selling it, so on and so forth. Traditionally, a lot of vendors have kind of had a specific group of partners that they take through this partner journey. So for example, of all the different partners and things that we had this homogenous group of, say, traditional resellers, maybe in a manufacturing space, or distributors. And now we have a very different view where these different types would come in and they would take the straightforward path through this partner journey, right? So traditional reseller, you've got to identify them and recruit them, work on them a little bit, almost in the same sense of trying to recruit a customer, enroll and activate them, and take them through almost in a sequence all these steps of enablement. And there are a whole lot of different pieces of technology that typically go into that and create a pretty convoluted partner experience in many cases, where you're enabling these partners with essentially the same technology stack that you do your internal direct employees, which usually came first, as Peter noted as well, and they go through this very sort of traditional path. The reality is, I would say even now, and then also more so even into the future, some of the trends that Peter mentioned, we definitely see playing out within our customer base as well, that we have to look at how we deal with these partners and bucket them and provide and enable partner journeys in very, very different ways than we have in the past. So those same partners that traditionally could be easily sliced and diced, if you will, or taxonomized by way of maybe just region or traditional program type, as you see on the right there, perhaps distributor or reseller. Peter noted there's all sorts of new partner types and programs that are running within programs. Unmanaged partners that are kind of flitting in and out, that don't necessarily build an entire business around any one brand, but are selling potentially multiple brands and are building businesses around value that is potentially ancillary to a brand, or just in terms of just general in a space. And really it's those influencers that are driving a lot of the demand within a channel. So as more and more data becomes available on this, and we look, as Peter's done, with a little bit of a wider lens, if you will, at the overall landscape of what defines a channel and how demand is driven for a vendor within that channel, and we dig another layer deeper at who those actors are that are driving that demand, we see all sorts of hybrid program types, for example, as well. And that in fact, we have a particular customer here that's based in the United States that sells some online SaaS software in the project management slash spreadsheet slash productivity space, because they actually fit in so many different spaces and verticals and areas that they have these sort of hybrid partner types where I believe they're up to 9 different partner program types based off of my last discussion with them. And those function fundamentally differently, meaning on a per deal, per interaction basis, they may be serving as simply a casual influencer type partner for a particular stream of demand that's coming into their channel, by virtue of say they're a CPA, for example, is one of their key verticals and routes to market. Maybe they're writing on the subject of tax strategy on a corporate level, and by virtue of doing that, they may suggest that the tool of the vendor, for example, is an apps tool that they have used and built out a practice and a methodology around, and simply be essentially operating as a passive referral type of a partner, versus they may actually have deals where they are papering in and running like a traditional reseller manager. And that same partner, depending on the nature of the engagement, depending on the specific unit of demand that's being generated, may operate fundamentally differently. And then we also have stages of life cycle where new partners versus partners that are perhaps showing waning interest or not active need to be looked at and treated differently, and have this partner experience that's tailored to the way they're operating and the current stage of life cycle that they're in terms of the time frame of the relationship that they have with the vendor or their own growth as a business. And then finally, performance. We have a need to look at and treat partners a little bit differently in terms of where they need to go in their journey. It's not a rigid partner experience based off of every partner can go through the same funnel, because some partners are simply built, equipped, and ready to go faster. Some of them, have higher growth potential and perhaps need to take advantage of certain things and aspects and benefits of the program to help accelerate that. Some of them need to take, frankly, some baby steps in that they're not quite ready to take advantage of the entirety of the traditional the partner journey, given that they don't have the ability to consume that or act upon that or so on and so forth. So when you look at the partner journeys now, you have all these different types of partners, right? And this is obviously a little bit of a silly hyperbolic illustration here. We don't recommend this as a best practice. I think if you send your partners through any of these journeys, they'll become dizzy. But highlights simply the fact that some of these different types of partners that are coming up, particularly some of those that Peter mentioned, some of these hybrid types, some of these more hands-off influencer types, they're coming in and they have different needs and expectations in terms of how they want to interact with the brand. Maybe they don't actually need to go through a full-blown traditional recruitment, onboarding, training, planning, strategizing type of a process. They're coming in and they're opportunistically saying, hey, I've got something that may be of interest to sell, and they can bring in influence them in that way. And I think previous to some of the more recent trends, and this already happened, but we haven't necessarily always had the data to see that happen and to quantify it and to have the attribution, as Peter mentioned as well, to really understand how these different partners actually look. We have sort of, we've had various other analysts and things that have referred to these even as the shadow channel, because the typical sell through resellers and even some of the more managed sell with referral type programs, they could mention a high percentage of the programs that we had supported traditionally and that likely existed or that the industry sort of fully acknowledged were in that category. And then you have these referral type partners that you sort of sell with. And now we're seeing a proliferation of some other types of partners like influencer only that a lot of programs don't formally support and don't realize how much of their demand is actually being generated or influenced, indirectly, if you will, by way of those types of folks. So all this just to highlight the importance and criticality of having what we like to call as our frictionless and irresistible partner experience, but experiences, right? That these experiences are, in order to be successful, have to be very partner-centric. These cannot be vendor-driven where the vendors sort of, as they have done often in the past, saying, here's how we want our partners to behave, and given that it's a privilege to do business with us, folks are going to follow this path and do things of that nature. And anything that doesn't really fit in their mold of how their program is established, how their partner experience, with being very rigid, is established, oftentimes that was a very disjointed, jumbled up experience that a partner was having to go through and navigate in order to contribute to the vendor's overall channel revenue picture and kind of grow their own business as well, particularly when it wasn't actually their core business, which was always to some degree the assumptive posture that some of the larger vendors take, especially, is that, hey, people are building a business out around our brand rather than people are building a business for themselves, and they may or may not have some opportunities to help generate demand with us. And so all these different types of partners trying to go down the same rigid path experience. So our partner experience engine that we've been building and continue to expand on is very partner-centric in that sense, is in that it's an ideal place for partners to actually be able to jump in. That's very easily and discoverable. It doesn't take a tremendous upfront investment to learn the ropes, if you will, and learn the bespoke particular partner experience systems and jumping around and different systems that they have to learn traditionally to come in and be a very managed reseller, for example, type player in a partner ecosystem. So this discoverability is essential, especially as you see more casual partners who are coming in opportunistically here and there, flitting in and out, and they still need that same one-stop shop to be enabled for whatever it is that makes sense for them and their type of a role that they're playing in your overall channel ecosystem. So now that we're aware of more of these types of partners, to be able to give them a view that matches what they're doing and doesn't necessarily include all of these extra things that doesn't align with what they're doing, it puts them more in the driver's seat, and also gives them consistency as they're working with vendors. Don't necessarily love this fact, but there's increasing proliferation of those partners who are not mono-branded, who are working with multiple brands, and the vendors who are understanding that and embracing that are competing for heart and mind share rather than lamenting that fact, and making it easier for those partners to have discoverability across brands and be able to focus on what they're doing to drive value for their customer base, rather than how do I navigate the specifics of this this vendor's particular ecosystem. So in that way, they're able to come in and get what they need in more of a pull, not just a push type model, is the way that Peter describes it, which I think is a very apt description and analogy to use in that regard. So it's really giving the right pieces that make sense for what they're doing in the role that they're playing at that given moment within the overall ecosystem, rather than sort of forcing everybody to have to work with the entire same tool set, even when maybe some of those tools don't apply at all to the given project that they're working on. And all of this really is set to automate the experiences and allow that to happen. So much effort is spent trying to manage all these different kinds of partners, and we see For a while there, we had almost sort of an artificial limitation. That's a bit ironic, given that the channel programs are all about being able to scale out demand generation, scale out how they go to market. And the limiting factor had always been the number of channel account managers who could manage these different types of partners. And so, depending on industry, somewhere around 50-to-1 was about the ratio where that could be done effectively. And so, as there's additional types of partners who need different care and feeding across different industries, and some that are operating in more than one capacity, it's not sufficient to simply chop up your program and say, here's a channel account manager to run the resellers, here's a channel account manager to run, our non-traditional, maybe unmanaged type referrals sort of folks, because not everybody fits squarely in one bucket. There's so much overlap that we can't depend one-on-one on an account management to be the thing that's managing and pulling them through and helping them navigate this. The experience itself has to be automated, and it has to be tailored to what role that partner's playing in that day, so that the channel account managers can actually focus on the more human aspects of development of the talent that exists, and whether it's obvious or latent and sort of hidden within the channel program, and then program analysis. And that's another area that is critical in today's program, where a lot of the channel has been, I hate to say it, but a little bit fluffy in terms of it's like blowing on a dandelion. You're sure that all those seeds land somewhere and pollinate and help proliferate your dandelion throughout the field, but it's very hard to capture the attribution of that, and that attribution is essential because that's what's helping you to see the types of partners that are organically forming within your program. And so that's sort of the smart channel management folks of the now and the future are watching before they're trying to drive. Instead of saying, hey, I'm the vendor, this is how we want people to go to market with our products and solutions, we're going to set up this program and it's going to run this way, and then hope that this kind of works for the channel partners and measure a few data points along the way, but without taking a step back and realizing the partners are organically cutting the trails. They're, in many ways, they're sort of the innovators, the canaries in the proverbial coal mine, if you will, where as they see opportunities based off of a vendor's products and services, they're sort of forming businesses and models and those sorts of things around that. So rather than a channel management and channel chiefs trying to predict that future and steer everybody, sort of just watch how those trails are being cut organically by the partners and how they're operating. Because that helps you understand how value is being created in your channel that you may not have driven, you may not have been, the top-down approach to sort of say, here's how value shall be created in our channel. But then it starts to help you realize what partners are doing what, how that's happening, and how that maps to program opportunities and which partners are positioned to take, to jump on those opportunities and help drive them forward. And then you can now start to draw lines around those things, value those trends, and say these types of partners are doing these types of things, or these types of things are things that are driving bigger portions of our revenue picture, and they're the things we need to then encourage. And so we can use that to then sort of create heroes by, informing, predicting, the sorts of actions and seeing what's going on in our channel program, which then, a lot of what we aim to continue to do in the future is move further down this nirvana path where we can automate even the identification of some of these trends. And the goal being to then be able to say, we see this new breed of partner, let's double down on that. Let's supercharge what they're doing, as we can now see the value of this additional layer of program emerging within our ecosystem. How do we quantify the value of that? How do we find out what's driving it? How do we attribute things to it? And then do we double down and invest more in that and now start promoting that and more directly and better enable that path through our program as part of the journey? Do we divest from ones that aren't? All those sorts of questions are the ones that you want to be able to see and act upon before starting to pave a path, if you will. So watch the partners as they cut their own trail, and as you see which trails are organically being traveled, then you go in and you double down by paving that for the masses to really automate even further how folks are going to come in and go down that path. So Peter also mentioned sort of, we kind of group them into pillars, but this idea of PMA, which we think is a very apt description, and we're honored to be, ahead of the curve in a way to where, as Peter's looking at the market more holistically in this partner management automation, being more than just the sum of the individual parts, right? So we've played traditionally in the sales enablement space and also the channel marketing space, but really looking at those as not silos, but in fact very interwoven. So, for example, a path that a traditional reseller might follow, of course, is a very sales enablement path where they may come in, do some marketing, then be in a very, sort of sales motion based off of the results on marketing. And so, TCMA, for example, may have been a, sort of next step or next phase of a maturing channel. Once they have the ability to manage the sales piece and manage that demand, now let's go do some more demand to sort of pump more into it. Whereas some of these more casual partners may actually be starting out more in the marketing side, but in a very soft, low-touch way, where they're, influencing buying decisions and things out in the market through social, in particular, through all the things that they're doing and the voice that they're having. And then only when that has yielded something, then they kind of maybe back in and say, okay, now it's time to perhaps be rewarded for having done so. But it wasn't something where I started out with this whole complex sales, because my intent was really just to sort of capitalize a little bit on some of the waves I'm making. And so we start out really in more of a marketing motion, and then only if something, and when something comes of that, we jump into a light sales type of a motion and then perhaps into rewards. So it's the synergy of all three of these different areas that is the holistic and total partner management automations, being able to automate the entire journey, regardless of where the entrance point to that loop is and where the exit point is on a given type of partner, which is going to vary significantly and continue to do so into the future. And then being able to take all of that channel demand, sales activity, marketing data, and use that so you're not flying blind, being able to identify what these future trends are, these new partner types that maybe are sort of self-identifying organically, and then being able to flex your PX, if you will, in the way that partners are doing business in a very agile, I don't want to say reactive, but highly responsive from a timing perspective, and being able to bob and weave and be nimble and adapt the program as fast as those programs are emerging and changing, especially as we see more of these hybrid programs and what I call sort of shapeshifters, which are the partners who may take various forms and roles depending on the nature of a particular opportunity, and maybe participating in more than one capacity or in a way that would align with more than one business model, for example. So those sort of three areas, if we can holistically blend those together to where they're not different silos that we take in lockstep through, but understanding that various types of programs are going to need different pieces of that in different orders, but all running upon a shared platform, which is really what makes it partner management automation, as opposed to simply a suite of solutions, but having that run on a shared platform where the connective tissue of the partner data, how we segment those partners, how we drive the business logic and workflows, how we configure those experiences, how we analyze them, all on one shared platform really is where it becomes PMA. And we're very excited and proud that the approach that we've been building to over the past several years aligns so well with forward-looking research and things that Peter O'Neill's doing to really validate this out and show that yes, indeed, the market is going this way, and to be well positioned to help enable people to be successful in that realm and in that regard. So we like the type of research, that the way that Peter is approaching this, again, as opposed to the sort of top-down silo product category base, but in terms of holistically, that this is about talking to what the actual practitioners of channel growth are doing in the industry, and couldn't be more thrilled to be able to benefit from the findings that he have, and also see that we seem to be on track and having that nice point of validation from the market in terms of how these things are playing out, and that we're well positioned to help people be successful with that. Any closing remarks on that, Peter?
No, Gary, no, thank you very much for your comments. And yes, as you said, you fit the category movement, developments, forecast very, very well.
Perfect. Well, we've got Peter's contact information and mine as well. So we thank you all for spending an hour with us and look forward to being able to perhaps work with you further as we ferret out how these changes are actually manifesting in your channel program, and perhaps we'd love the opportunity as well to help you tool against them and develop and drive some of these partner experiences that are going to make your particular program one that partners want to flock to and be a leader as we enter these new futures for channel management as a whole. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.